Congressman Putnam, you just announced recently you're running for the Agriculture Commission. Why make the jump from being a congressman to the AC position?
Well, you know, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, I think that there is a time and a season for everything, and you ought to be able to depart Washington on your own terms, not just necessarily horizontally or in handcuffs. And as somebody who believes in, you know, people serving their time and then coming back home and reestablishing their roots in the state, I think that's important. I have an agricultural background. I think it's important that whoever the Ag Commissioner is actually knows something about agriculture, but also have a vision and a passion for the future of our state beyond just agriculture. And as one of 4 cabinet members in Florida, the Commissioner of Agriculture is 25% of the board of directors of our state, and helps to regulate utilities and insurance companies and banks and public lands. And so it's very important that we recreate a pro-business climate in our state. And I believe that I can make a bigger difference for the people of Florida as one of 4 on that cabinet than as one of 435. And so it's a part of my roots and my DNA and who I am to be a part of promoting our second largest industry, but also as a 5th generation really creating a better Florida, a more competitive Florida, and being able to do that more effectively than as one of 435 in our nation's capital.
Can you explain to my audience what the Commissioner of Agriculture does, briefly?
Well, first and foremost, the obvious, promoting our state's second largest industry and working with our producers, our farmers, and our ranchers to keep our food security, to keep our food here so that we're never as dependent on other countries for our food as we are today for our fuel. Number 2, it has a broad consumer services portfolio, regulating everything from timeshare sales to private security companies, protecting our Second Amendment rights with the concealed weapons permits, weights and measures, protecting the consumer from frauds and scams, the no-call list, just a small cross-section of the consumer protection responsibilities. And then finally, as I discussed in the first question, most importantly, sitting as a member of Florida's cabinet. You know, our cabinet is the governor, the attorney general, the chief financial officer, and the commissioner of agriculture. We don't have a commissioner of beaches. We don't have a commissioner of tourism. We have a commissioner of agriculture that really is there as part of the board of directors of our state to guide, working with our legislative leaders, to guide the direction and the agenda of the state of Florida so that we can come out of this recession stronger than we went into it.
Do you support the recent deal between the state of Florida and U.S. Sugar? Do you support that deal?
Well, it continues to be refined, and
right.
As it has gotten smaller, I think it has become a better and better deal for the taxpayer than what it began as. With record unemployment, we should not be wiping out agricultural jobs that are existing in the Glades area, in that rural part of our state. There is an opportunity, I think, for us to benefit from purchasing lands that can contribute to us increasing the water supply. Water resource issues will always be a defining public policy challenge for Floridians, but it should not take the form, we should be very careful about it taking the form of identifying an industry and wiping it out and purchasing it whole cloth. The original deal had the state buying railroads and citrus processing facilities and sugar mills. The state doesn't have any business owning those properties.
Well, speaking of railroads, what was your take on the Sun Rail? Did you support that?
You know, going back to the
Speed Rail,
Going back to the first high-speed rail initiative that was put before the voters, I supported that. I think that high-speed rail is a part of future mobility issues for our state. I think that the construction of it does create jobs, and when you expand the width of an interstate by 1 lane, you're getting 2,000 more cars an hour. So there is a place in our future transportation plans, I think, for high-speed rail. The commuter rail issue is really something that the communities themselves have to work out. My particular community would be impacted by additional trains coming through Lakeland. We want to, if that's going to happen, we want to make sure that there's mitigating effects to that. We want to make sure that the state negotiates the best deal possible as it relates to the business side of it and to the liability side of it. So all of those factors, I think, have to come together in the right way if Florida's going to make the kind of investment that calls for.
You've been recently criticized for backing the Tarp bill and backing the Cash for Clunkers. Can you explain to the audience why you backed both of those?
You know, when we look at September of last year, September of '08 rather, the nation was at an incredible precipice. You had money market funds breaking the buck, something no one had ever seen before. We had the largest bank failure in U.S. history, and 2 days later, very nearly the second largest bank failure in U.S. history. We had blue chip companies like GE unable to move overnight bonds. I mean, think about that. The overnight lending rate, even between banks, they were so uneasy about the precarious nature of our global finance markets, they wouldn't loan to each other overnight. And so we were in an unprecedented situation where I believe that TARP was necessary. I believe that it was unprecedented, and it's unfortunate that we had to take such extreme measures, but I do believe that it saved this nation and frankly the global finance from going over the edge. When you look at how banks have rebounded, they have paid that back because of the strings that we attached that the Bush administration didn't call for. That was House Republicans that demanded that we put the strings on those banks, and of course they've moved quickly to get out from under it, which was always the incentive we wanted to place on it. The government has made money off of the repayment of some of those TARP loans. The Obama administration has now begun to abuse that TARP program, which was a short-term emergency fix for our financial system, and then they took it and started loaning it out to automakers and a whole host of other purposes for their own socialist agenda. That is clearly not the intent of what we voted on in that first vote, and it is an abuse of its mission. And so I will go to my grave convinced that the depression that we would have fallen into would have been far more severe than even what we saw 70 years ago, and that the passage of that original bill with a narrow focus and with the additional burdens we placed on the banks by House Republicans, that we did avert a crisis, and that the moves that the Obama administration has made since then, well, were a usurpation of that original mission and have not in any way stabilized the financial condition that was the original intent.
And then lastly, the cash for clunkers. Can you explain that?
You know, the overwhelming portion of state sales tax collections in the state of Florida come from car sales. I mean, that's the biggest sales tax, biggest item that you'd buy that you'd collect sales tax on. You look at the actual reaction that people had, it motivated demand. And so we moved vehicles, we moved American-made vehicles, we moved foreign company vehicles that were manufactured inside the United States, and it not only kept people working who are in this country, it also stimulated sales tax, which benefited local governments like the state of Florida that depends so heavily on sales tax. So I think there are countless examples where we incentivize behavior using the tax code, and it's sloppy and it's messy, and it's one of the reasons why we frankly need to scrap the code and start over. But it does have an effect, which in this case was positive for the state of Florida in spiking sales tax collections and generating demand. It was stimulative for that period of time that it was in place.
You're going to speak tonight at the Broward Republican Executive Committee. What's on tap for your campaign? What are you guys doing moving forward?
We're off to a great start in this campaign. We've begun the year with several great straw poll wins under our belt. 27 state House members who've endorsed the campaign.
Pinellas, correct? You're very well
big win in Pinellas. We continue to roll out endorsements from other elected officials. Our grassroots network is growing. We have 6,000 Facebook friends. This is a grassroots campaign that really has always been what's been successful for me as an elected official, reaching out to the hardworking men and women like you see here at the Broward REC who make the difference for conservative candidates. And I'm honored to have the support that we've been able to gather thus far.
Great, thanks a lot.
You bet.